In the last 6 days, Ukraine has hit more than 70 Russian ships, not soldiers, not tanks, ships, oil tankers, tugboats, ferries, cargo vessels, struck one after another in a sea that Russia has controlled without serious challenge since the days of Catherine the Great. And now, for the first time in this entire war, Moscow has done something it swore it would never do. It has shut the door. Russia has suspended shipping through the Kerch Strait. It has closed the Don Azov Canal. The Sea of Azov, the inland lake that feeds Crimea, that ships Russian grain to the world, that keeps occupied southern Ukraine supplied, has effectively gone dark. And it wasn't a missile that did it. It wasn't a submarine, a warship, or a NATO carrier group. It was a swarm of cheap unmanned drones flown by operators sitting in bunkers hundreds of miles away who have just proven that you don't need a navy to defeat one. If you've been watching this war long enough, you know how rare a moment like this actually is. So stick with me because today we're going to walk through exactly how this happened, why it matters far more than the headlines suggest, and where this is likely heading next. Before we get into it, if you appreciate this kind of grounded, no nonsense breakdown of the war, hit subscribe and drop a comment letting me know what you think is coming next in the Black Sea. For most of this war, the Sea of Azov was the one place that felt untouchable for Russia. The Black Sea, sure, Ukraine had already humiliated the Russian Navy there. They sank the Moskva. They chased the entire Black Sea fleet out of Sevastopol and forced it to relocate to Novorossiysk. They opened a grain corridor without a single warship of their own, using sea drones and sheer audacity to do what many analysts thought was impossible. But the Sea of Azov was different. It's smaller, shallower, tucked behind the Kerch Strait like a private lake. Russia annexed its entire coastline in 2014 and 2022, Mariupol, Berdyansk, the Kerch Strait itself. For years, it was Russia's safest body of water, a place where tankers could load fuel, grain ships could dock, and military logistics could move toward Crimea without anyone seriously threatening them. That safety is now gone. And it didn't disappear overnight. It eroded strike by strike until the walls came down all at once. Here's the timeline, and I want you to really sit with these numbers because they escalate fast. On July 10th, Ukrainian forces struck 13 Russian vessels near occupied Crimea, including 10 tankers tied to what's now infamously known as Russia's Shadow Fleet. Robert Brovdy, the commander of Ukraine's unmanned systems forces, said Ukrainian forces had struck 18 Russian vessels overnight, explicitly targeting logistics supporting Moscow's war effort, 13 oil tankers linked to the sanctioned Shadow Fleet, 3 cargo ships, 1 ferry, and an auxiliary vessel. That alone would have been one of the largest maritime strikes of the entire war. But it wasn't the peak. It was the opening move. The very next night, July 11th, Ukraine came back and hit even harder. Ukrainian drones struck 21 Russian tankers and 7 other vessels in the Sea of Azov overnight. 21 tankers, 4 tugboats, 2 dry cargo vessels, and 1 specialized vessel, recording 73 successful strikes during that single operation. Brovdy didn't hide his satisfaction. The shadow tanker fleet is noticeably shrinking, he wrote on Telegram. It appears traffic through the Kerch Strait has been stopped. By his own count, the total number of destroyed Russian Shadow Fleet vessels reached 90 units in that single week alone. Now stack those nights together, and you start to see the real shape of this campaign. One tracking account documented 28 vessels hit in the Sea of Azov in a single night alone, 21 tankers, 4 tugboats, 2 dry cargo ships, and 1 special craft, with 76 Russian vessels total having tried to resupply Crimea over that stretch. Independent maritime analysts tracking the pattern noted the 28 hits overnight on July 11th pushed the total to at least 76, and that video evidence showed the strikes focused specifically on engine rooms, bridges, and fuel handling machinery, disabling vessels without necessarily sinking them. That detail matters, and we'll come back to it because disabling is arguably smarter than sinking. And this wasn't a one-week flash in the pan. Ukrainian military officials say more than 40 Russian tankers have been targeted in the Sea of Azov in recent weeks as part of a deliberate campaign to strangle fuel supplies to Russian forces and further isolate occupied Crimea. This is a sustained operation, not a lucky night. Here's where it gets genuinely historic. Because striking ships is one thing, Ukraine has done that before in smaller numbers for months. What happened next is the part that should stop you in your tracks. Russia surrendered the strait. At 6:10 p.m. local time on July 10th, Russian border guards told shipping companies they would no longer accept applications for passage through the Kerch Strait. Think about what that sentence actually means. The Kerch Strait isn't some minor waterway, it's the narrow choke point connecting the Sea of Azov to the Black Sea, the passage Russia built an entire bridge over in 2018 as a monument to its permanent grip on Crimea. And Russia just told the world's shipping companies, don't bother applying, we can't guarantee your safety here anymore. Russia temporarily suspended commercial navigation through both the Kerch Strait and the Don Azov Canal following the coordinated drone campaign targeting its maritime logistics and oil infrastructure. And that second piece, the Don Azov Canal, is arguably even more damaging in the long run. The canal links the Sea of Azov with Russia's inland river network and the Caspian Sea, and its shutdown is a significant blow to Moscow's export options and military logistics. This isn't just about ships getting hit near the front, this is about Russia losing the ability to move goods from its interior, through its own rivers, out to the wider world, a route that has quietly kept Russian trade alive since the war began. Andriy Zagorodnyuk, Ukraine's former defense minister, put it in stark terms. Moscow had lost control of a critical maritime corridor. Without access through Kerch and the Bosphorus, he argued, the Caspian Sea had effectively become a lake for Russian exports. A lake. Cut off. Landlocked in all but name. That's not spin. That's geography, and geography doesn't negotiate. If you want independent confirmation that this wasn't just Ukrainian propaganda or a few dramatic telegram posts, look at the satellite data. The Institute for the Study of War cited Starboard Maritime Intelligence data showing a possible 55% decline in vessels with active AIS transponders in the Sea of Azov between June 30th and July 11th, a 55% drop in visible ship traffic in less than 2 weeks. Whether that's ships rerouting, ships delaying, or ships simply switching off their transponders to hide from drones, every explanation points to the same conclusion. Russia lost control of the sea, and the attacks didn't stop once the strait closed. Ukrainian units struck 10 oil tankers, 4 ferries, and a major oil refinery in Syzran during overnight operations from Saturday to Sunday, and a drone struck a tanker as it entered the Azov Black Sea Canal, according to Yuri Slusar, the governor of Russia's Rostov region. Even with the strait officially closed, Ukraine kept hunting anything that moved. On Saturday night alone, Russian authorities reported drones attacking 4 vessels in the Gulf of Taganrog, including a tanker transporting methanol, and air defense units around Taganrog reported intercepting over 15 uncrewed aerial vehicles targeting the city and surrounding districts, meaning even after the shutdown, Russia is still fighting a losing air battle just to protect its own coastline. Now let's talk about who exactly is getting hit, because this is where the strategy becomes genuinely elegant. Ukraine isn't randomly shooting at anything that floats. It's surgically dismantling something specific, Russia's so-called shadow fleet. If you're not familiar with the term, here's the short version. After Western sanctions hit Russian oil exports, Moscow built a workaround, a fleet of aging tankers often flagged to obscure countries, uninsured by legitimate Western insurers, operating in the shadows of international shipping law to move sanctioned oil and stolen goods around the globe. These vessels serve Russia's military logistics, cargo transportation, port infrastructure maintenance, and, critically, the transport of oil and petroleum products in circumvention of sanctions, funneling money straight into financing the war. And it isn't just oil. OSINT analysts have confirmed that Russians are openly selling stolen grain, coal, and metal looted from occupied Ukrainian territory to countries like Turkey and even Israel, buyers who either don't ask where the goods came from or accept Russia's explanations without question. Much of this trade runs through the ports of Taganrog and Azov, where a large share of the marine traffic flies flags from African and Oceanian nations before heading onward to Turkish and North African ports, and some of it is transshipped onto larger vessels in the Black Sea to further obscure its origin. That's the machine Ukraine just took a sledgehammer to. Every tanker hit isn't just a burning hull on the evening news, it's a direct hit on the financial pipeline that keeps Russian artillery shells falling on Ukrainian cities. This is economic warfare disguised as a maritime campaign, and it's working exactly as designed. The tactics themselves deserve a moment of real respect from a pure military analysis standpoint. Video evidence shows the strikes concentrated on engine rooms, bridges, and fuel handling machinery, disabling vessels without necessarily sinking them. Why does that matter more than sinking? Because a sunk ship is gone, a tragedy, but a clean one. A disabled ship is a nightmare. It sits there, it clogs the harbor, it needs tugs, repair crews, spare parts that Russia increasingly can't source because of sanctions. These crippled vessels occupy port space and consume resources for repair, effectively clogging Russian ports and shipping routes long after the drones have gone home. It's not destruction for its own sake, it's a deliberate strategy to jam the machine, not just break one gear. Now, here's the part that should genuinely worry people far outside Ukraine and Russia, because this war just reached your grocery store. Market analysts estimate that up to 1/4 of Russia's wheat exports transit through the Sea of Azov. Not a rounding error, a quarter. Russia is the largest wheat exporter on Earth, and a quarter of that flow runs through a body of water that Ukrainian drones have just turned into a shooting gallery. Reuters reported that wheat futures on the Euronext exchange rose as much as 4% on July 10th, reaching a 6-week high amid concerns over possible disruptions to Russian grain exports. The Azov Sea is described as a critical maritime artery for that trade, with major agricultural hubs in the Rostov and Krasnodar regions sitting directly along its coastline. Think about the layers of irony stacked up here. Russia invaded Ukraine, one of the world's great breadbaskets, and spent years weaponizing grain, blockading Ukrainian ports, and stealing Ukrainian harvests to sell as its own. Reports confirm Russia has been selling looted Ukrainian grain from territories like Luhansk under the cover of this same shadow fleet. Now, the very drones built by the country whose grain was stolen are choking off the route Russia uses to sell it. There's a kind of poetic justice in that, but don't mistake poetry for comfort. When wheat futures spike 4% in a single day, that ripples through bread prices, feed costs, and food security in countries that have nothing to do with this war. This is why you should care about a canal near Rostov-on-Don, even if you've never heard of it before this week. And it's not just grain moving through that corridor. The Sea of Azov is used by Russia to move oil products, grain, steel, and military supplies through occupied ports, including Berdyansk and Mariupol. Steel, fuel, weapons, food, an entire regional economy, both civilian and military, running through one increasingly indefensible stretch of water. Let's zoom out because this campaign only makes complete sense once you see the bigger picture Ukraine has been building for over a year. The first phase of this broader campaign was designed to sever Russian landlines of communication into occupied Ukraine, a project that began in earnest around April 2026 with concentrated drone attacks on rail lines and bridges feeding into Crimea, including the Chongar and Geneches crossings. Key highways like the M14 and M18, logistics hubs, and vehicle convoys deep in occupied territory and inside Russia itself, where dropping a bridge used to be a rare event requiring scarce Western-supplied weapons or special forces operations. This campaign relied on drones carrying substantial warheads, hitting every bridge, no matter its size, in a short, relentless window. Each individual bridge only contributed a modest amount to Russian supply lines, but hit enough of them fast enough, and you don't just damage logistics, you collapse an entire network. And now the second phase, and the maritime phase, is doing to the sea what the first phase did to the roads. Ukrainian officials and analysts say the latest strikes are designed to isolate Crimea, disrupt fuel flows, and reduce Russia's ability to sustain operations in southern Ukraine. Think about what Crimea actually is logistically. It's a peninsula. It has exactly three ways in: the land bridge through southern Ukraine, the Kerch Bridge, and the sea. Ukraine has spent the war systematically making all three unreliable. The land routes get hit by drones and rockets. The Kerch Bridge itself has been struck multiple times and remains a standing liability rather than an asset. And now, the sea route, supposedly the safest, most secure option, has effectively closed itself. Ukrainian forces have also carried out several attacks on electricity substations in Russian-occupied Crimea, and the same overnight operations that hit shipping have targeted electrical substations, further degrading the logistical and energy networks supplying Russian forces on the peninsula. This isn't disconnected harassment, it's a deliberate, coordinated squeeze. Power, roads, bridges, and now the sea, all tightening around the same piece of occupied land at the same time. And Ukraine isn't stopping at Crimea's doorstep. Ukraine's military reportedly struck a major Russian oil refinery in the city of Syzran in Samara Oblast, hundreds of miles from the front line, overnight on July 12th. One outlet reporting on the broader campaign claims roughly a third of Russia's oil refineries have now been knocked out of production, alongside the halt in grain exports and Russian frontline troops going without adequate supplies, a claim worth treating with appropriate caution given the source, but one that fits the documented pattern of refinery strikes we've tracked across this war. Now, Russia hasn't just been sitting there absorbing hits. It's hitting back, and we should give that its due weight because this isn't a one-sided massacre. It's a war fought on both sides of the same sea. Over the same weekend, Russia targeted Ukrainian maritime infrastructure on the Black Sea, striking cargo infrastructure at Ukraine's Chornomorsk port near Odessa, damaging facilities used for military cargo handling, fuel storage, and ammunition, according to Moscow's defense ministry, and also hitting two ferries and a container ship. Ukrainian agricultural group Colonel Holding was forced to suspend operations at Chornomorsk after reporting significant damage from Russian missile and drone attacks between July 10th and 12th. So Ukraine's grain shipping infrastructure is under fire too. This is a mutual siege of maritime commerce, not a clean Ukrainian victory lap. There's also the matter of what Moscow will actually admit to. Per Russian-aligned reporting, the Russian side has not officially commented on much of this, though it has partially confirmed the drone strikes. That silence is telling in its own right. When you're winning, you talk. When your inland sea just got closed by drone boats, you can't stop. You go quiet and hope the story fades. But here's the strategic reality Russia is now facing, and it's uncomfortable for Moscow no matter how you spin it. Every option left on the table is bad. Keep the strait open and you keep losing ships, dozens of them, night after night, each one a financial and logistical loss. Close the strait and you cut off a quarter of your own wheat exports, choke fuel deliveries to your own forces in southern Ukraine, and hand Ukraine a strategic victory without Kyiv needing to fire a single artillery shell. There is no version of this where Russia comes out ahead. That's what makes this moment different from so many turning points we've discussed before in this war. This one has no clean off-ramp for Moscow. Let's not lose sight of the human cost sitting underneath all these numbers, because it's easy to talk about tankers and canals and forget there's a war grinding on beneath the headlines. Russian attacks over the last day alone killed at least 5 people and injured 35 others across Ukraine, mostly in frontline regions in the south and east. The maritime story is dramatic and it deserves the attention it's getting, but it exists inside a war that is still, first and foremost, killing people every single day. On the diplomatic front, this moment is drawing serious attention from Washington. Senator Lindsey Graham, speaking in Kiev, urged greater military support for Ukraine and pressure on Beijing, saying the coming months could prove decisive. Graham had met with President Zelensky on July 10th to discuss strengthening Ukraine's air defense and progress on a Russian sanctions bill in the U.S. That timing isn't a coincidence. A sanctions bill gains a lot more momentum in Washington when you can point to satellite images of a burning shadow fleet and say, "Look, this is working. Keep the pressure on." And meanwhile, Zelensky said on July 11th that he is preparing changes to Ukraine's diplomatic efforts to accelerate weapons deliveries from allies as Ukraine's stockpile of Patriot air defense missiles has run dry. That's the sobering counterweight to everything we've just discussed. Ukraine can dominate a sea with $3,000 drones and still be dangerously low on the interceptor missiles that protect its cities from Russian ballistic strikes. Asymmetric brilliance in one domain doesn't erase vulnerability in another. This war is being fought on a dozen different boards at once, and Ukraine is winning some of them decisively while still fighting for its life on others. So, where does this leave us? Let's step back from the day to day strike counts and talk about what this actually represents, because I think the real story here is bigger than any single week of drone footage. For decades, naval power meant one thing: big steel, big budgets, big crews, aircraft carriers, destroyers, submarines that cost more than some national GDPs. That was the price of admission to control the sea. What's happening in the Sea of Azov right now is a quiet demolition of that entire assumption. Ukraine, a country with no meaningful blue water navy, has functionally denied Russia, a nuclear power with a standing navy, the use of its own inland sea. Not with ships, with loitering munitions and long range one way drones that cost a fraction of a single tanker's cargo. That is not a footnote in military history, that is a preview of it. Every navy on Earth, from Washington to Beijing to New Delhi, is watching this exact sequence of events and rewriting assumptions about what a safe coastline even means anymore. If a country with no navy can shut down a strait guarded by a nuclear armed neighbor using drones assembled in garages and repurposed factories, then the entire calculus of maritime security, insurance rates, shipping routes, naval procurement, sanctions enforcement, starts to shift under everyone's feet, not just Russia's. For Russia specifically, the near term picture is grim and getting grimmer. The Kerch Strait area is home to Russia's second largest port in the Black Sea basin, making this corridor crucial for Moscow's foreign trade. Losing reliable access to it doesn't just dent one region's economy, it threatens the financial arteries that keep the broader war machine funded. Every tanker that doesn't sail is money that doesn't reach the front. Every refinery that goes offline is fuel that doesn't reach a tank column. Every substation in Crimea that goes dark is one more crack in an occupation that was never as stable as the Kremlin liked to claim. Does this end the war? No. Let's be honest with each other. One extraordinary week of drone strikes doesn't unwind 3.5 years of grinding conflict, and Russia still holds significant Ukrainian territory with hundreds of thousands of troops committed to holding it. But strategic exhaustion isn't built in a single dramatic moment. It's built in exactly this way: attritional, economic, relentless, chipping away at the logistics that make an occupation sustainable until the cost of holding on exceeds what even an authoritarian system can absorb without cracking. Sea power built empires. Losing it has broken them. Russia is now living through a modern drone shaped version of that very old lesson, and there's no indication Ukraine intends to ease off the pressure anytime soon. Here's what I keep coming back to. Somewhere off the coast of Taganrog right now, there are dozens of Russian tankers sitting still, disabled, smoking, or simply too afraid to move. A sea that was supposed to be Moscow's safest possession has become its most exposed vulnerability, and it happened not because of some massive coalition strike or a NATO intervention, but because Ukraine built the will, the technology, and the sheer relentlessness to make it happen on its own terms. That's the story underneath the numbers. Not just 70 plus ships hit in a week, not just a canal closed or a strait shut down. It's a demonstration in real time that determination paired with cheap, smart technology can humble a nuclear powers navy without a single Ukrainian warship ever leaving port. We'll be watching closely to see whether Russia reopens the strait under pressure, doubles down on air defense around Taganrog, or simply absorbs the loss and reroutes what's left of its trade through the Caspian. Whatever happens next, one thing is already certain: the Sea of Azov will never again be the quiet, untouchable Russian lake it was even a month ago. If this breakdown helped you actually understand what's happening beneath the headlines, do me a favor. Subscribe so you don't miss the next one, and drop a comment telling me whether you think Russia reopens that strait within the month or whether this shutdown becomes permanent. I read every single one, and I'll see you in the next video.